This is Brett Olin.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Chuck Prodnick.
This is Alex Kreiner.
Hey, this is Brad Wall. You're listening to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Wednesday. How's everybody doing today? Precious metals. Yep, they could be in your stocking. Maybe you should do that. I don't know. Throw it in a loved one's stocking. Christmas is around the corner, and Silver Gold Bull can get things shipped. Yeah, we're getting tight. We're getting real tight, honestly, to days before Christmas. But I did it last year for the kids, and for Mel for that matter, and it's just an idea. Just an idea of a stocking stuffer. It is the ultimate insurance policy to protect all of your hard-earned savings, you know, with a form of money that's been recognized for thousands of years. I'm talking Silver Gold Bull. I'm talking Silver Gold and Silver Gold Bull, that is. And they got complete in-house solutions, whether buying, selling, or storing, or adding precious metals to your retirement accounts. Text or email Grahame down in the show notes. Go to silvergoldbull.ca for more information. Text them, let them know that, or text them down in the show notes, text Grahame, and let them know I sent you. Caleb Taves, Renegade Acres, they got the community spotlight. I'm actually wearing a Renegade Acres t-shirt right now. Yeah, I tell you what, Caleb, if you're listening, this shirt's like wicked. Anyways, that's a complete side note. Cornerstone Forum 2025 is heading to Calgary, Alberta, May 10th. Early bird tickets on till the end of the month. That's it. December 31st, they are gone. Keynote speakers include Tom Luongo, Alex Kreiner, Chuck Prodnick, Kalen Ford, Matt Arrett, Chase Barber, Ben Perrin. More coming. Lots more coming. I've worked out like 85% of the day now. And as we get closer to December 31st, I'm going to keep announcing speakers. And I think you're going to be extremely excited for what is coming to Calgary. Of course, we got guest hosts Chris Sims and Tom Bodrovics. And down in the show notes, tickets on sale, early bird tickets, January 1st. All the tables with speakers going to be released, so you can also buy one of those. Would love to see you there. May 10th in Calgary, Alberta. Going to be a ton of fun. The Deer and Steer Butchery, I tell you what, Christmas season is, well, we're here, but we're getting close to Christmas. If you've bagged an animal, you need to get it sliced, diced, tossed in your freezer. Look no further than the Deer and Steer, 780-870-8700. Give the butcheress Amber a call. She is she's the butcheress at the Deer and Steer. She's going to make sure you get it all in your freezer. Substack, it's free to subscribe to. Comes out every Sunday, 5 p.m. We'll see what we do through Christmas here. I might throw in a couple extras and give myself, I'm working on giving myself a little bit of time off, folks, if I can, between basically Tuesday next week through to close to New Year's. We'll see. There will be tons of content coming out here. As for Substack, we'll see how much I put out there. I'll make sure I keep everybody posted, though. If you're watching on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, make sure to like, subscribe, leave a review, leave a comment. All these things really help. And if you're listening, watching on X right now, I'm talking to you, give it a retweet. That'll help us break out of all these echo chambers. I appreciate all the help, all the support. Merry Christmas to all you wonderful people. I'm probably going to keep saying that now for like 5 in a row, but appreciate you being along for the ride here in 2025. And remember, December 31st, top 25 of 2024 will be coming out exclusively on X. I always count down the top 25 episodes of the year. I think I'm going to shock everybody with what the number one episode is. Maybe you already know. Maybe you don't. I don't know. I'm curious your guesses. You can fire away on the text line. I would love nothing more to interact between here and December 31st on what the listeners are saying. All right, let's get on to the tale of the tape. He's a best-selling author, world-renowned speculator, and libertarian philosopher. He's lived in 10 countries and visited over 175 in his lifetime. He's known as the International Man. I'm talking about Doug Casey. So buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Doug Casey. Sir, thanks for making some time this morning.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Shaun, although in my case, here is out on the Pampas in Uruguay, which is where I spend, I think, most of the year.
And how is it there? I'm just curious, because here we're cold. Freeland just stepped down from being the Minister of Finance in Canada, so that's huge news. There's constant talk of stupidity with World War III. I can go down the list of problems, and then I hear I can see the sunshine, and I'm like, well, maybe things are just brighter over there.
Well, here, take a look out the window or the door.
Oh yeah.
You can see. So
for listeners, that looks pretty nice.
Yeah, it really is. Are we mostly listeners or viewers?
Actually, it's about 50-50. I got to be careful when I say that now, because I haven't, I was just telling you about the latest episodes that exploded. There's been a lot on YouTube, so a lot of viewers now.
Well, in any event, here in Uruguay, it's a beautiful spring day, sunny, mild, just delightful, actually. So that's how it is here. And frankly, what happens to you locally ought to be much more important than what happens internationally or nationally, because that's just stuff you hear about in the news. And we don't have any firsthand data, firsthand reality about any of that stuff. It's basically just stuff that comes across the computer or on the TV screen or something like that. So what happens locally and here and now is much more important and should be, unless, of course, we have a nuclear war, which is entirely possible. The idiots that run the governments of the world really seem to be plumping for a war at this point. And I'm not sure most people, the hoi polloi, the capita censi, the average people, I don't think the average guy is too concerned about it. Or maybe at this point, the average guy kind of figures that the old clock on the wall says that it's time for a major war. So I don't know what to think. You have an opinion on that?
I think when Donald Trump got elected, a lot of people went, okay, we're gonna back away from war, and they're back to, in the middle of COVID, Doug, when nobody could do anything. I think there was a lot of people started to look at things and pay attention. There's certainly a lot of you out there still. I'm not saying they've all disappeared, but a lot disappeared when COVID kind of went to the back door. People could go to restaurants and hockey started back up, and where you didn't have to wear a mask, and kids sports in particular, where I sit. And so then you had the election, and everybody was worried. Kamala Harris was like, if we get that, like we're going to World War III. I don't think there's any argument there. But Donald Trump gets elected, and now they're talking in different ways where I think it looks to me like we're going to walk away from it. But I don't know, that's where I sit.
Well, that's a reasonable view, but that's assuming that everything goes along smoothly in between now and January 20th. When Trump is installed. And these people have tried to kill him twice, and they might figure that the third time's the charm. And not to mention that, there's all kinds of buffoonery these psychopaths can get up to in between now and then. So, I think we'll have morning in America starting January 20th. But, even then, morning only lasts 6 hours because we're in really tumultuous times, and just changing the president of the U.S., it's a good thing. I mean, look, I'm not crazy about Trump in a lot of ways, but the good news is that Kamala, I'm pronouncing it, that's a Spanish phrase. It means how bad. Sounds like her name, actually, Kamala. The big thing is that the Democrats weren't elected. But hey, it ain't over till it's over.
And I think that's where I sit. Everything you're talking about there, it would be the second portion where my brain goes is like, but it's not like Trump got elected and then Monday he showed up to office. This whole waiting till January 20th to me is so bizarre. Because I mean, like in between here and there, in peacetime, if there's such a thing, and you don't have to worry about escalation of wars and different things. Okay, maybe not having the new president come in and sit the week after the election maybe makes sense. But when you're sitting on the doorstep, or maybe the door cracked to World War III that could go nuclear, I go, oh my God, this is like the worst case scenario. Like, why would they do that?
Well, look, not only that, but Biden is, in addition to his numerous moral faults, is actually senile. He's not in control of either his body or what's left of his mind. And the people that are actually in back of Biden making the decisions, they're all Jacobins. They're the same kind of people. The people in control of Washington now are the same type of people that controlled France after the revolution. They're very, very dangerous. They have the same kind of political mentality, the same philosophy, the same views of the world as those people did in France 200 years ago. So it's really a dangerous situation right now. It really is. Well, I'm happy to be here in Uruguay because if they start, I spend most of the time here, a lot of the time in Argentina, and the northern summer in Virginia in the U.S. But if they start launching bombs at each other, the southern hemisphere is a pretty good place to be for a number of reasons. There's no targets down here. That's a plus. And if it gets really out of control, weather systems mean that our survivability down here is higher. But hey, listen, nuclear war isn't a sure thing. It's a long shot still. So let's look at the bright side.
When you say the Jacobins' mentality and their outlook on the world, what is that? Because I know who the Jacobins are roughly. I know the story of the French roughly. But when you say they're Jacobins and their view of the world, what do you mean by that?
Well, the Jacobins were a group that took over after the French Revolution in 1789. And they were responsible for the execution of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. And they wanted to transform French society totally. They changed the months of the year, gave them new names. In fact, there weren't 12 months anymore. There were 10 months. And they wanted to overturn the whole basis of French society. It was a total revolution. And that characterizes who they were. Robespierre was the leader of it. They were responsible for all the guillotinings, incidentally. About 30,000 people, as best as we can tell in France, met the guillotine because they were considered to be ideologically impure or members of the previous ruling class. So the Jacobins in France were kind of an overture to the really horrible things that then happened in the 20th century. Stalin and Hitler and Mao and Pol Pot. So total collectivists, and I'm not a fan of collectivism. I'm a fan of individualism and personal freedom and this type of thing instead. Anyway, that's who the Jacobins were. And these people in Washington are cut from the same cloth. They really and truly are. I lived in Washington for 20 years, sad to say, and got to know the kind of people that gravitate towards the Washington Beltway. Washington draws a certain type of person, just the way Los Angeles draws a certain type of person, people that want to be in Hollywood or something like that, or Las Vegas draws a certain type of person. Well, so does Washington.
Yeah, it's interesting when you put it, like drawing a certain type of person, and then they get their own echo chamber, I'm sure, and own worldview reinforced. So if you're, like you say, you don't like the collectivism or a collectivist, and they all start to congregate in the place that has all the power, or at least where all the policy and everything else is used to shape the United States of America, you can kind of see where we're at then in the history of the United States of America, which, still is one of the global superpowers of the world.
Yeah, but the country is changing right before our very eyes. I mean, it's true that Trump won very broadly, but if you can believe the voting numbers, and I don't believe the voting numbers because I think there was a lot of cheating on both parts, but certainly on the part of the Democrats. But let's assume that there was an equal amount of cheating between the two of them, or Trump only won by a percentage point or two. And what that means is that half of the country believes in the kind of things that the Democrats believe in. Higher taxes, much more government spending, don't cut regulations, increase regulations. These are dangerous people, these Jacobins. And apparently half the country, almost half the country, voted for them and wanted them in office. So I'm not sure there's a lot of cause for optimism, even though we're going to have a morning in America. But morning only lasts 6 hours.
Do you have any faith then, like with Doge, with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, and I mean others in there as well, right? But those in particular with reducing the size of government and thoughts like that. Do you no hope there?
Super idea. Love the idea. And I like both Vivek and Elon as guys to try to put it into effect. But people apparently have forgotten that during the Reagan administration, and that was another morning in America time, they had a thing called the Grace Commission, where Grace Corporation was a Fortune 500 company in those days, and the guy that ran it, what was his name? Well, his name was Grace. Tried to do the same thing, and the effect was almost nothing. A little bit of trimming around the edges, that's all. And in those days, the deep state wasn't nearly as entrenched as it is now. Not nearly as virulent, not as big, as strong as it is now. So are Vivek and Elon going to have as much effect as the Grace Commission did, which was very little? I don't know, because look, they're going to be met with lawsuits, and all along the way, the people whose rice balls would be broken by the excellent things that they say they want to do are going to fight them tooth and nail. So, God, I hope they get something done, but you can't be optimistic about it today. Anyway, if they want to make the government more efficient, that's dangerous. I want the government to be less efficient because the government's not our friend, it's our enemy. So I don't want it to be more efficient. And if they take agencies and they just trim back some fat, prune off some useless limbs, a few here and there, that's actually dangerous. And why is that? Because just like with a tree, if you prune it, it grows back stronger. The only way to solve this problem with the government is to pull out these agencies, not just individuals, but whole agencies by their roots, and pour Agent Orange in the ground where they grew. That's what you have to do. Can they do that? Will they do that? Well, like I said, they'll be buried in lawsuits for years. So anyway.
I'm curious, Doug, if we move away from the United States and we go to Milei, what have you thought of his first year as prime minister?
President, actually.
President, yes.
Well, I'm just across the mighty Plate River from Argentina. I spent a lot of time in Argentina, obviously. Milei is wonderful. He is actually, in many ways, the most interesting and benign and radical thing that's happened in world political history in hundreds of years. I mean, it's truly amazing. He is a genuine ideological anarcho-capitalist, which I am also, incidentally. He doesn't believe in the right of the state to exist, and he does want to tear it out by its roots. And he's made a lot of progress. He doesn't have a majority in the parliament, which has made it harder for him. But the Argentine president has a lot of power, more power actually than the US president does. And he's fired 30 or 40,000 government employees so far. He's abolished agencies. He's eliminated regulations. He's gotten rid of price controls on. So he's cut government spending so that now Argentina, for the first time in its history, maybe certainly modern history, is running a surplus, so they don't have to print money to finance it, which is what the U.S. government does and the Canadian government does. They print money to finance their deficits. So Argentina is running in the black, and his next step is to eliminate dozens of taxes. Down here in Argentina, you've got lots and lots of different kinds of taxes, and they're a real nuisance. And he's just going to get rid of them because the government doesn't need them anymore. So, answer to the question, listen, Milei's not perfect, but he's really, really good.
When I hear that story, I go, if it can happen in Argentina, can't it happen in the United States of America?
Could it happen in the U.S.? Well, that is the $64 question. Could it happen? Well, I don't know. Listen, I want to be an optimist. And for the long run, I am an optimist about the fate of humanity and so forth. I'm optimistic that in maybe 20 years, certainly 50 years, the world will be vastly more wealthy and hopefully vastly more free. And we'll be conquering the planets. And life extension will have made it possible for you to live a long time in good health. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons for optimism. I'm optimistic from that point of view. I mean, it's the ascent of man. It's been ongoing since the end of the last ice age, and it's been getting better at an accelerating rate, a geometrically accelerating rate. So I'm optimistic. Just let me say that to start with. But is it possible in the meantime? Because, the advent of socialism is one of the worst ideas that's ever imposed itself on humanity. And so many people believe in socialism and central control and the government being the most important force in your life. So are they going to be able to do in the U.S. what is happening in Argentina? It's a big country, and listen, it's quite possible that the next step that happens in the U.S. will actually be a civil war. Forget about a boom and a resurgence of freedom like we're seeing here in Argentina. It might be we see something resembling a civil war in the U.S. So, but there are so many people whose rice bowls are going to be broken if Trump succeeds the way Milei is succeeding. And you got to remember, Donald Trump is not an anarcho-capitalist by any means. He's kind of an opportunist. He's a big business guy. He's got some good ideas that he doesn't want the government to bother him. Okay, great, that's super. But I don't know. Will it succeed?
The reason I ask, sorry, Doug. The reason I'm curious is because I'm like, I'm an optimist, right? I look at, I got told once upon a time certain politicians didn't exist. Then I saw Bukele in El Salvador, and I heard his interviews, and I was like, who is this guy? And then my brain goes, oh, it's a small country. That's why it gets to exist and everything else. But it was like one of the most dangerous places on earth.
Oh, it
And then,
was.
and in 4 years, boom, it's like it's
I
cleaned
know.
up,
It's
right?
night and day. Listen, I've been to 155 countries, and I've lived in 10 or a dozen. I lived there long enough to buy a house or something like that, or long-term rental. And El Salvador was the worst shithole in the Western Hemisphere, with the exception of Haiti, where I've also spent a lot of time, incidentally. So yeah, I was really shocked and pleasantly surprised. But maybe you can only do something like Bukele's doing or what Milei is doing when the country has hit bottom, where it's the bottom of the barrel, and you have to do something radical because there's no choice to do anything but something super radical. And maybe the U.S. hasn't hit that bottom yet. People are still living really high off the hog. True, it's all borrowed money, it's all inflated money, but there's not an adequate sense of crisis yet. Although maybe there is for the people, the lower middle class, and the people below the middle class. They can't pay their credit card bills, or saddled with all this idiotic student debt. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I wonder, maybe the U.S. isn't the right country to ask about, because when you think of the U.S. and you think about what the U.S. dollar means to the world, and how many, their military might and blah blah blah, it kind of gives you this. I can just imagine that you're the big kid on the block, so to speak. I look at Canada, though, in a different light. We've had 9 years of Justin Trudeau. Things are just like falling off the rails every which way. You got pretty much revolt in Alberta with Danielle Smith at the helm. And I look at the size of Argentina, which I believe, I just looked at it. It's 44 million people roughly. And Canada's, 40 million people. I go, the thing that people go is, well, it's too big a country. It's too vast. It's blah, blah, blah. And I go, no, like, you're starting to see, as much as there's this talk of like, we're going into World War III, and that is on the table. I go, the other side of that is we could be going into a crazy time where things start to maybe swing the other way. And I look at Bukele, I look at Milei, I look at these different countries starting to do things. And then, the ability to conversate like this and actually hear about these ideas is starting to filter into the population just as much as the bad ideas are. And that is really interesting to me. Like, look at Justin Trudeau in Canada. The polls show him getting absolutely massacred. Chrystia Freeland, who I would have never thought would be along until that ship sunk, just put a resignation letter in. And her letter basically called Trudeau out, and in a way that I, is almost a bit shocking as a Canadian to see them two going at it. Like, it just shows where the Liberal Party's at. And part of that is certainly having Pierre Poilievre, love or hate that man, there to be the next, I assume, leader of Canada, but also the information getting into all these countries and watching, the El Salvador and Argentina, for me specifically, or love or hate Putin, watching him, how he's acting towards NATO and the things going on there is really interesting from a Canadian sitting here. I don't know. I see all those and I go, I'm more positive now than I thought I would be, even though we do sit on the brink of possibly World War III, of nuclear war, which is an insane thought.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I agree with you 100% on that. So there's cause for optimism. There's no question about it. But, it's going to be a close run thing. And you've got to remember that Trudeau was popularly elected.
Yes, he was.
So, just like Biden was popularly elected, and all these other fools in the U.S. were enthusiastically elected by a majority of the population. So there's a lot of risk and a lot of danger politically. This is why, I guess, when we started our conversation, I said, what's really important is what you do in your life, as opposed to what happens. Because frankly, we can't affect what happens with these great masses of people. Even if you own a major broadcast station, if you own the CBC or the BBC or CNN, well, that's not a good example. It's ceasing to exist. But even if you own one of these major outlets, you can't really change things. So the wisest thing to do is to look out for number one and your family and your friends and your local area. That's what you should do first. Make sure that you're insulated from the stupid things that these other people might do. We can talk about world politics. I do it all the time, and national politics, but it's just entertainment because we can't really do much to influence it. So take care of your local area. That's the advice I'd use. Make sure that you work hard and produce more than you consume and save the difference in a prudent place, which is not to say either the Canadian or the US dollar. Those are bad places to save your money. So do things like that. And your standard of living, your personal wealth will go up, and that will be cause for genuine optimism.
I agree with you on pretty much everything. The only thing is, where I sit, and like, I think we are having an effect, because if you look at the CBC, let's stick to. I don't know the numbers off CNN and and Fox and all the others, but like CBC is now at times less than 1% of the entire population watching in Canada, which means they get a ton of funding. Don't get me wrong. They got all the infrastructure, but Doug, nobody's watching them. They're tuning into things like this and others. And I'm not patting myself on the back here. I'm just a small piece of this puzzle, and it is a very big puzzle. And what's happening is people are going elsewhere for their information. Now, is it overnight things change? No, I think one of the realizations I've had from doing this show is that it is going to take time, and lots of time, and there are going to be ups and downs and everything else. It's just, the only way the government's going to get control of the narrative again, like complete control, is to do something very heavy-handed. And the problem is, every time they're heavy-handed, things like this, as long as they're allowed to exist, and I don't want to see that out there, except it's already there, right? If they could squash it, they would. And they can't seem to do that. And every time they go heavy-handed, people talk about it. And it's getting out further and further because, the numbers are showing it. The trends are showing it. And that in itself is affecting which way we go.
Yep, there's cause for optimism. And if you look at Europe, you see that the average guy is unhappy with the installation of Keir Starmer as the prime minister, and the UK is slipping rapidly economically. Germany, it's actually turning into a police state again. And maybe the average German is becoming unhappy with that. So who knows? There might be something magical that happens someplace in the world. Another Milei, another Bukele arises from all this. Well, I'm optimistic, and I keep my eyes open for it. But like I said, in the meantime, I'm just taking actions to make sure that I'm not too adversely affected by the stupidity of whoever might get into office. And I'm very happy that Trump was elected as opposed to Kamala being elected. But he could do something stupid.
He certainly could.
It's because these people in government have way, way too much power. That's the real problem, actually. It's not we need better people in government. Sure, that would be nice. But you never get better people in government because only a certain type of person wants to get into government and tell other people what to do. And anybody who wants to be in government probably has a psychological problem. Yes, there are exceptions, and we've talked about two of them, Bukele and Milei, but they are really the oddball exceptions. But cause for optimism. Things are better in those two countries.
You know, one of the
You think Alberta might secede from Canada?
do I think that?
Yeah.
Not in the near term.
No.
Something crazy would, and I don't even know what that would be. I look at it, and the time where the mentality was there would have been 2019, I believe. The second time Trudeau got elected, I remember thinking it myself, what is going on? And then the Wexit was following Brexit, started to become a thing, and it died as soon as it went up, mainly because of nobody was there to steward that energy, if you would. And so if you're true in wanting to separate Alberta from Canada, that's what you believe. I think you have to build something yesterday and have to be ready for when Pierre Poilievre is not at the height of where he is right now, which means you're now like looking at what, 2029, 2033, something like that. And then when that comes again, because it will come again, you have to be there ready to capture all that energy and be like, well, this is where we go. So that takes a lot of forethought, would be my thought.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I mean, because there have been independence movements in Quebec, a number of them over the years, and none of them got, and I'm sorry about that. It would be good for the Quebecois and good for Canada if they were a separate country, as far as I'm concerned. In fact, if we go back to, what was it, 1949, when Newfoundland became part of Canada. And that was a tragic error on their part. I mean, Newfoundland might have become another Cayman Islands if they'd stayed independent. They could have become incredibly prosperous instead of just a backwater, which happened to them by joining Canada, if they'd gone the way of the Cayman Islands, for instance. But anyway, this is alternate history.
Yes, you're not wrong. You know, one of the things that gives me optimism, I guess, is I interviewed Maxim Benjamin Smith, who the preparation, and I found this idea very interesting. Folks can go back and listen to that. I had him on a while back, and the
Yeah, they
program.
definitely should. It's what Maxim is doing is huge. It's important. I mean, it's special. It's something that everybody in a position to should do. Sorry to cut you off, but I just had to say that.
Well, it's these ideas. This is one that I believe has come from you, Doug. This idea of the preparation, the program aiming to equip young men with the tools necessary for future success. And, once again, I would go back and listen to it. That would be my suggestion. We have shout out to Kaylin Ford here in Alberta with classical education. She's got a charter school with 1,300 kids in there, and it's learning Latin. It's doing a bunch of different things that I'm like, in how many years does that take? Does that take 5 years? Does that take 10 years? But the population is going to be surrounded by people who aren't up on pop culture. They're learning different things. They're learning classical education. They're learning a different way to look at the world, I guess. And I go, what does that do to our population? What does that do to our province? I say good things, but that takes time. I see this idea behind the preparation, which aims, to give young men tools. I'm like, that takes time. But what does that do? Does Milei become the anomaly, or does he now become the normality? Like, does that become more normal, that people are looking at the world differently? These are the ideas that take time, when we have to get there. Like, we had to get to the election. Well, they almost took Trump out, but then we got the election. And then we go, did they cheat? Yeah, they both cheated. But like, all the polls, everybody looked, it looked like it was going Trump. It went Trump. Now you go, he's got to get to January 20th. I agree 110%. And certainly out there, you're seeing, like, I don't know what your thoughts on the drones out by New Jersey and everything else going on. Man, everybody jumped off but you got to get to January 20th.
This drone thing is interesting. It's been admitted that it's quite real. It's not just a mass hysteria, but these high government officials, from Biden and Mayorkas, horrible people both, on down, they apparently, if they know what's happening, they won't say, they can't do anything about it. They can't come up with anything definitive. It makes you wonder, the US government's supposed to have all this power and all this knowledge, and there are apparently hundreds of large drones floating around the Northeast, and nobody knows. I mean, what the hell is going on here? It's got to be the U.S. government up to something nefarious. That's what I think. But it's so stupid because the truth will come out eventually. But what are they doing? I mean, there's all kinds of guesses about what drones are doing at night, flying around everywhere in the Northeast. But it just exposes the utter incompetence of the U.S. government, that they don't know, or they can't say if they know, or some agency's doing something and the other agencies won't let it be said. It's insane. It's like unmocking the whole stupid scheme, that they're not competent, they're not knowledgeable. And a lot of these people in the government are just evil. I mean, in a free society, you shouldn't have something like that happening where everybody's wondering and nobody can find out.
Yes, I agree. And the fact that the most powerful military under the sun can't go, right? I mean,
right. I mean, look, the Northeast is full of air bases. Hey, wait a minute. Why don't we send up a couple of our helicopters and have them go up there and shine a spotlight on these things and find out what they are? Hasn't anybody thought of that? It seems pretty obvious and easy.
Well, I assume they have. That's why there's more to the story, right? That's when you go back to three-letter agencies and everything else. Yeah, I just sit here and I hear that story, and Shaun of 5 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago, would have been like, "What's going on? Is this aliens? Is this actually? That's where we're going?" Now I'm like, I just smell government. I just smell it all over it. And now, could it be something different? Could it be something more nefarious? Could it be some other country? Sure, but at this point, I mean, knowing what the U.S. has done to lots of different nations, to its own people, and on and on and on, this smells like something's cooking.
Yeah, look, the government is not we the people, okay? It's nothing like that. It's a bunch of people that have gotten into the government and have been drawn to it, and they like it there. It's not we the people at all. There is such a thing as the deep state. And what is the deep state? The deep state is top generals, top Congress people, top corporate guys, top academics. In other words, people that are high up in society. It's not a conspiracy, the deep state. It's just that these people have the same interests. They go to the same parties. Their kids go to the same schools. They have the same financial interests, the same worldview. And so, yeah, these people basically control the society, not just the government, but they absolutely control the government of the U.S. And every country basically has its own deep state. Canada does, Germany does, they all do, the UK. And these people love to get together at things like the UN, which is basically a sham and should be abolished, but things like the OECD and the Davos gathering, which is, the deep state on parade. These people actually control things. So forget about these stupid idols about democracy and we the people. They don't exist.
If you look into 2025, let's assume we don't have nuclear war. Let's just assume that. Let's assume Donald Trump gets inaugurated. Let's assume a couple things. Bitcoin just went over 100,000 US. Gold's at all-time highs. What do you see coming in the next year, Doug?
Lots more inflation because the U.S. government is running, well, nobody really knows at this point because it's all so out of control where, Biden, by a stroke of the pen, loans the Ukrainian government. I mean, come on, what a joke. Loans the Ukrainian government $20 billion backed by stolen Russian assets. I mean, these people are out of control. They don't know how much they have, how much they're spending, anything. So, and Trump, in order to keep the ball rolling, to fend off a 1929 style credit collapse, which is entirely possible, incidentally, because of the huge amount of debt in society. Not just government debt, corporate debt, credit card debt, automobile debt, mortgage debt. A lot of people can't pay it. It becomes a daisy chain, bringing down the banks and everything. So, all right, answer to the question. We're going to see much higher levels of inflation in the future. And if Elon and Vivek succeed in deregulating, well, that's good. That'll be more efficiency, less inflation, less wastage of capital. But you're going to see the dollar accelerate its progress towards its actual value, which is zero. Essentially, it's backed by absolutely nothing except the ability of the U.S. government to extract taxes from its subjects. So one thing you can plan on is much higher inflation. And I think long-term interest rates are headed up as well, along with inflation. Short-term interest rates can be manipulated by the central bank. So higher long-term interest rates, higher inflation, those are two things that you can count on.
Do you, we've brought up Argentina, we brought up El Salvador. Do you see another country out there where you're like, you should really pay attention to X?
Well, like I said, I've been to 155 countries, spent a lot of time in all of them. It's not just, landing in an airport or something like that. So what other country would you should have in your sights and watch? Well, actually, I'm here in Uruguay next to Argentina. It's doing well, and it will do better now that Argentina is turning the direction it has. Southern Brazil is absolutely excellent as a place to go. It's very much like Europe, which Argentina is very much like. Very different from the rest of Brazil, north of Rio de Janeiro. I'd forget the rest of South America, quite frankly, and Central America for that matter. Where else would I look? Australia is turning into a police state. I lived in New Zealand for years, and where to go? What countries are headed in the right direction and should be of interest to you as a place for your capital? Nope. I think if you want to invest internationally, and you should put your money in Argentina, because property prices are still extremely low in Argentina. I mean, I can give you examples and you'll be flummoxed by how cheap things still are in Argentina. Stock market's gone up 50%, but from such a low base, it could go a lot higher because the country is going to boom. It's going to become very prosperous and very free, unless something very bad happens accidentally from out of the blue in Argentina. So, nope, Argentina is where it's at. I don't know where else you could go, frankly. I mean, can you think of any place? I mean, I used to be a fan of Canada, but not anymore. I mean, Canada is no longer the Canada that I once knew. The massive migration that it's experiencing from third world countries is totally changing the nature of Canada. And it's going to change its politics in a bad way, I think, frankly. So it's tough luck for Canada. All the problems the U.S. has, I think, are even worse in Canada.
It'd be interesting to see here. Like we've been waiting for an election now for how long, right? Our government's been propped up by the NDP, which is a really weird problem to have. And probably there's way more experienced listeners than this guy sitting here. But to just watch it play out, it's been really strange, right? Leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, is waiting for basically February to pass by my eyes so he can get his pension. And that's the only reason there hasn't been a non-confidence vote. You're just like this is just, like it's the ship isn't even on its last legs. It's already sunk. It's already burned. It's already had all the rats flee. It's everything. And now it's just like life rafts holding on, waiting for the next election when they're going to get completely wiped off the map. It's not even, in my opinion, unless, as you say on Argentina, unless something completely out of the blue happens, they're going to get absolutely wiped off the map. And I guess my eyes, I'm waiting to see when you have a new leader of Canada, what that looks like for Canada, what issues continue to persist. You put it towards where the United States is, and I just wonder about that. I don't actually know, and my eyes are fresh enough, Doug, that I can't actually sit here and say I've been watching for 20 years and it's going to play out the same way the last 20 years have. So I have hope, but it's pretty tempered at this point. I'm not expecting a giant shift on everything in Canada.
Best thing that could happen to Canada is that the provinces separate and become independent countries. That sounds very radical, and Canadians will say, no, you can't do that. Well, why not? All over the world, throughout the dawn of history, the colors of the map on the wall have been running, and that will continue. And it's even possible in the U.S., in fact, likely over the next 100 years, that the boundaries of the U.S. are going to change. And a lot of it's economics. Look, Social Security in the U.S. is totally and absolutely bankrupt. And the assets that Social Security has is nothing but a special class of government bonds, which are slowly being inflated out of existence. And so the question is, well, how are they going to maintain Social Security? Well, they can only raise Social Security taxes, quite frankly. But how likely is it that a young Chicano guy in Southern California is going to want to pay 20% of his income to support some old white broad in Massachusetts who needs the Social Security? Well, I'd say the chances are slim. So I think you could find parts of the U.S. separating. There was a movie that came out last year, maybe it was earlier this year, called Civil War. Did you see it?
I watched part of it and turned it off.
What didn't you like? Well, I can see what you wouldn't like about it, but what made you have that reaction to it?
It felt a little too close to home at that time, and it just really irritated me, right? Because I just feel like no different than what was the movie with Julia Roberts where they have they basically go back to the Stone Age and they're in the house and all hell's breaking loose. I can pull it up that way. I got somebody yelling at the radio right now going, it was this movie.
I don't recall offhand.
You don't know the one with
Julia
Obama?
Roberts, what happens?
Yeah, Obama helped leave the world behind.
Oh, that movie. Yes. Well, that's... Yeah, well, with people like Obama at the helm, I would expect that things could come unglued in that manner. But I thought it was interesting that, before the action occurs, you have to think the thought. And the meme has to be out there and circulate in society. And in the recent past, there have been movies about a terrorist group taking over the White House and Harrison Ford or some other heroic U.S. president battles them off and kicks them off of Air Force One or grabs an M16 and fights them off in the White House. But this time, in this movie, they ramped it up. And the rebels actually capture the White House. Not only do they capture it, but they execute the president. I mean, this was a story that took it all the way. And I thought it was very interesting and not a badly done movie, incidentally, just as a movie.
Well, maybe over the Christmas holidays.
Yeah, no, it's a perfect Christmas movie. So yeah, absolutely.
Doug Casey, thanks for hopping on. I want to make sure I don't overextend our time. I appreciate when you hop on and do this, and look forward to hopefully having you back on in 2025. Merry Christmas on your end of the world.
Oh, thanks. But shouldn't you tell people that they ought to opt into my blog, internationalman.com,
Sure.
or watch my
Actually,
YouTube
what I
channel?
should probably do is go, Doug, where can they find you?
That's right. Well, that's the question. In addition to internationalman.com, which is an excellent free blog, I've got to say, and my YouTube channel, Doug Casey's Take.
I might add in as I cross over on you is that your free blog is excellent, right? That's how we initially get connected. Is Alex Craner knew you, and I asked. Anyways, long story short, my brothers all read it. I read it. There's lots of excellent information there. Apologies. Now carry on.
I appreciate that, Shaun, and also because you have a literate audience, they should go on Amazon. I have 3 novels out so far: Speculator, Drug Lord, and Assassin, that follow the history of our hero, Charles Knight, as he advances through these 3 politically incorrect occupations on his way to 4 more in the future, hopefully, even more politically incorrect occupations. So start with Speculator, which is where Charles gets lucky with a Canadian mining stock and goes to West Africa to check it out. And it's a fraud, and he gets involved in a bush war, and he makes and loses lots of money. And so go on Amazon and pick up any one of those. Although I think
what you're saying is, if you're looking for a stocking stuffer, folks, why not go pick up a Doug Casey book? Throw it in there.
Oh, thank you. That's actually a good idea. I think the reader will be amused, at least.
Well, I'm always looking for creative gifts for the stocking. Last year, I gave the kids a 1-ounce silver coin, which I'm not sure they fully comprehended. They're pretty young, but I thought, I'm like, this is great. The stocking just became something completely different than what it used to be, And
that's right. That is a gift that won't wind up in a landfill. So good thinking on your part. And that coin is worth more today than it was a year ago.
Correct.
By chance.
Well, Doug, appreciate you coming on and doing this. Hopefully have you back on in 2025. I'd appreciate that. And I think the listeners enjoy hearing from you as well. Either way,
Okay.
Thanks again, Doug, for doing this. All the best to you. And we'll look forward to the next article that comes out on your end.
Thanks.